This episode contains depictions of extreme violence, gun warfare, and psychological trauma. The individuals discussed operate in worlds where lethal force is not a last resort, but a constant. Their actions reflect environments shaped by loss, conflict, and moral collapse. Listener discretion is advised. Violence does not begin with the trigger. It begins long before that, in the moment something breaks. For some, it is loss. A single moment that takes everything and leaves nothing behind but anger. For others, it is realization. The understanding that restraint is not protection, but limitation. Both arrive at the same place, but they do not take the same path to get there. There are men who fight to stop violence, who believe it can be contained, controlled, balanced against itself. They operate within lines, even when those lines blur, holding on to the idea that there is still something worth preserving on the other side of it. But there are others who come to a different conclusion entirely, who look at the same systems, the same failures, and decide that containment is not enough. They do not try to fix what is broken. They do not try to hold the line. They remove it. Not all at once, and not without reason. But once it is gone, they do not look for it again. Because when you accept that the world cannot be saved, there are only two paths left. You can try to control what remains, or you can burn through until nothing left to threaten you. One chose to punish the system that failed to stop, not restore the balance, but to ensure what slipped through never had the chance to do so again. The other looked at it the same system, saw inefficiency, something that could be refined, streamlined, and ultimately replaced by something more direct. Both arrived at the same conclusion in different ways. The line was no longer necessary. And when two men choose different answers to the same problem, they do not debate, they do not negotiate, they do not hesitate, they collide. Welcome to Chaos Crucible, where power is not just measured, but it is also tested. Not by circumstance, and not by the narrative, but by confrontation. Two individuals are placed against one another without interference, without protection, and with an outcome already decided. Because most in the stories, something guides the result. Timings shift, chance intervenes, and someone arrives when they are needed most. Here, none of that exists. What matters here is what they bring with them, their skill, their instinct, their experience, and most importantly, the decisions they make when none of it goes according to plan. Because preparation only carries you so far. At some point, every fight becomes something else, something unpredictable, something that forces a choice. Tonight, we look at two men who operate beyond the limits most refuse to cross. On the one side is Frank Castle, a soldier shaped by loss, a man who does not believe in second chances because he has already seen what happens when they are given. His war is not symbolic, and it is not restrained. It is direct, final, and absolute. On the other side is the grim knight, a tactician who abandoned restraint not because he lost control, but because he decided control required more. He did not reject discipline, he refined it, removing hesitation, removing limitation, and replacing both with efficiency. They share a mission, they share a method, but they do not share a limit. And in confrontation where both are willing to do what is necessary, the question is not who is more dangerous, it is who is more precise. Because in fights like this, there are no wasted movements, no second chances, and no room for error, only outcome. Let's begin. What happens in a fight like this is never decided in the moment. It is not built on instinct alone, and it is not something that appears under pressure. Every movement, every decision, every line that is crossed or ignored is shaped long before the first shot is ever fired. The battlefield only reveals what has already been formed. Fights like this are not decided by strength. They are not decided by who is faster to react. They are decided who they became before they ever had to make that choice. Because when the moment comes, when hesitation is no longer an option, there is no time to think about who you want to be, only who you are. And to understand how this ends, you have to understand what created them. Frank Castle was not created in a single moment. He was built over time, shaped by environments where hesitation carried consequences and decisiveness meant survival. His years in the military did not make him unique, but they made him effective. They gave him structure, discipline, and a clear understanding of how violence works when it is applied with purpose. But that foundation alone was not enough to define what he would become. What changed him was not the introduction of violence into his life, but the removal of everything that balanced it. The loss of his family is often described as the moment that created the Punisher. But it did not introduce something new. It gave direction to something that was already there. It stripped away restraint, leaving behind clarity that did not require justification. Frank Castle did not see the world in the terms of redemption or second chances. He sees patterns that repeat and the systems that fail to interrupt them. In his perspective, failure is not occasional. It is consistent. And anything that fails consistently is not something you repair. It is something you eliminate. And that belief does not make his actions chaotic. It makes them focused, intentional, and final. His war is not driven by impulse, even when it appears that way. Every action serves a purpose, even if that purpose is simple. Remove the threat. Ensure it does not return. There is a code beneath it, one that is not forgiving but still present. He does not see himself as judge or executioner. He sees himself as consequence. Across from him stands something that mirrors that outcome, but not the path that led to it. The Grim Knight begins the same place as Batman. There is a loss. There is a trauma. There is the decision to act instead of remain passive. But the difference is not found in the event. It is found in how the event is interpreted. In most cases, Bruce Wayne builds restraints into his mission. He creates rules, boundaries, and limits designed to prevent escalation. Those rules are not signs of weakness. They are intentional. A structure meant to ensure that he does not become the very thing he fights against. They exist to maintain control. The Grim Knight rejects that structure entirely. Not because he loses control, but because he reaches a different conclusion. He looks at the same war on crime and sees inefficiency. He sees repeated cycles, returning threats, and a system that prolongs conflict instead of ending it. In his view, restraint is not a safeguard. It is a limitation that allows the problem to continue. So he removes it. What remains is not chaos. It is refinement. Every skill, every discipline, every element that defines Batman is still present, but without restriction. The result is not a protector. It is a tactician who no longer hesitates, a strategist who does not hold back, and a combatant who only stops when the objective is complete. Where Frank Castle is driven by loss, the Grim Knight is driven by conclusion. One reacts to what was taken. The other acts on what he has determined to be true. Both arrive at the same understanding, that the system does not work and the conflict does not end. But they do not arrive here at the same way. And in a fight like this, that difference is not small. It is defining. Origins explain perspective, but they do not determine outcome on their own. What matters is how those perspectives translate into action once the distance closes and the fight becomes real. Because understanding the world is one thing, surviving it, shaping it, and controlling it under pressure is something else entirely. When preparation meets resistance, when plans begin to fracture and variables shift, what remains is not belief, it is execution, the ability to move with purpose, to adapt without hesitation, and to impose structure on a situation that does not offer it freely. In a fight like this, skill is not measured by what they know, it is measured by what they can apply when nothing goes according to plan. Frank Castle fights with a foundation built for war, not performance. His training is not theoretical, and it is not designed for controlled environments. It is practical, direct, and shaped by situations where efficiency determines survival. He understands weapons are not as tools, but as extensions of intent. Every firearm, every explosive, every improvised option is something he can integrate without hesitation, because his experience is rooted in application, not study. His approach to combat reflects that background. He does not overcomplicate engagements, and he does not rely on unnecessary movement. His positioning is grounded, his timing is deliberate, and his actions are built around a single principle: end the threat as quickly and effectively as possible. He is not concerned with control over the entire battlefield. He is focused on the target in front of him and the fastest path to remove it. What makes Frank dangerous is not just his ability to fight, but his ability to continue. He absorbs pressure, adapts within it, and maintains forward momentum even when conditions are deteriorating. He creates opportunity through persistence, forcing engagement into spaces where his experience gives him an advantage. Across from him, the Grim Knight operates from a different framework entirely. He does not enter a fight to react. He enters it to control. Everything associated with Batman is present in his approach: physical conditioning, technical mastery, and an understanding of combat that extends beyond direct confrontation. But that foundation is typically balanced by restraint. Here, it is directed towards efficiency. The Grim Knight does not rely on improvisation unless it serves a larger structure. His engagements are built in layers, with contingencies prepared in advance and variables accounted for before they become problems. He does not just respond to movement, he predicts it, shaping the environment in ways that limit his opponent's options before they even are aware of it. Where Frank applies pressure, the Grim Knight applies control. He positions himself not for the current exchange, but for the next one, ensuring that every movement creates a disadvantage to the person across from him. Distance, sightlines, access points, all of it considered, not as obstacles, but as tools. The difference is critical. Frank Castle thrives in prolonged conflict, where resilience and adaptability allow him to push through resistance and create openings over time. The Grim Knight seeks to eliminate that time entirely. His goal is not to endure the fight, it is to end it before it fully develops. Both approaches are effective, both are dangerous, but they operate on different timelines. One builds pressure until something breaks, the other removes the possibility of that pressure ever forming. And in a confrontation where both are capable of lethal precision, the question is not who can fight, it is who controls how the fight unfolds. Skill determines how a fight is executed, but it does not determine why it continues. Technique can carry a moment, strategy can shape an encounter, but when those begin to break, when the pressure builds and an outcome becomes uncertain, something else takes over. Because at a certain point, every fight stops being about capability. It becomes about conviction. What they are willing to do, what they refuse to do, and more importantly, what they no longer question once the line has already been crossed. Because when hesitation disappears, what remains is not instinct alone. It is belief, carried forward into action without resistance. And in a confrontation where both individuals have already moved beyond restraint, that belief is not a background detail. It is the deciding factor. Frank Castle does not operate without a code, even if it appears that way from the outside. His actions are extreme. His methods are final. But they are not without the structure. And that structure is built on a clear distinction, one that does not shift depending on the circumstance. In his view, there are those who create harm and those who suffer from it. And the space between those two groups are not meant to be negotiated. That belief simplifies the world in a way that allows him to act without hesitation. It removes uncertainty, removes the need to question outcomes, and replaces it with a direct path forward. But that clarity comes with a cost. It leaves no room for deviation, no space for reconsideration. And once a decision has been made, once someone has been identified as a threat, the outcome is already determined. This is where Frank's strength and his limitation intersect. His conviction allows him to move forward when others would hesitate, to commit fully in situations where doubt would slow the process. But that same conviction can be anticipated. It can be read, understood, and under the right circumstances, used against him. Because while he does not hesitate, he does not also deviate. Across from him, the Grim Knight operates without that constraint. He does not divide the world the same way. He does not rely on fixed definitions of guilt or innocence. And he does not anchor his decisions to a moral boundary that must be maintained. His perspective is not built on judgment. It is built on outcome. If someone presents a threat, it is removed. If something interferes, it is dealt with. The reasoning behind it is secondary to the result. There is no need to justify the action beyond its effectiveness. That absence of limitation does not make him unpredictable. It makes him adaptable in ways that a structured code does not allow. Where Frank Castle commits to a path and follows it to its conclusion, the Grim Knight adjusts that path as needed, shifting approach without hesitation if it produces a more efficient result. He does not carry the same weight of decision, because for him, the decision is already simplified. What works is what is done. This creates a fundamental difference in how each man approaches the conflict. Frank Castle brings certainty into the fight. The Grim Knight brings flexibility. One is grounded in conviction, the other in calculation. Neither approach is inherently flawed. Both have proven effective in the environments that shape them. But when placed against each other, those differences do not balance out. They collide. Because in a prolonged engagement, where variables shift and conditions change, the ability to adapt without hesitation becomes important as the willingness to act without restraint. And in that space, where belief meets adjustment, and the outcome no longer determined by who is willing to go further, it is determined by who can change the direction without losing momentum. And once that line is reached, once conviction and calculation are pushed into the same moment, there is no separating them again, only the result that follows. Conviction determines why the fight continues. Strategy determines how it is shaped. But there comes a point where neither exists as theory anymore, where the distance closes, where preparation meets resistance, and where every decision must be carried out in real time. Because once the fight begins, there is no returning to what came before, no opportunity to reconsider, no space to rebuild what has already been set in motion. There is only movement, reaction, and the consequences that follow both. In a confrontation like this, the battlefield does not favor hesitation. It does not reward overcommitment either. It responds only to what is applied, and it shifts without warning when control begins to slip. And when these two individuals who do not hesitate are placed within that space, the outcome is not shaped by intention. It is shaped by execution. The environment does not offer clarity. It offers fragments. Lines of sight broken by steel, by concrete, by the kind of structural decay that turns distance into uncertainty. Movement is possible, but never without risk. Every step reveals something and exposes something else in return. Frank Castle enters it with discipline, not rushed, not hesitant, but aware of what this kind of space becomes once the fight begins. His movements are deliberate, each position chosen for what it gives him and what it takes away from anyone watching. He does not search openly. He reads the environments as he moves through it, understanding that the first mistake will not be corrected. The first shot does not attempt to end the fight. It defines it. The round strikes close enough to force movement, to confirm distance, and to establish timing. And Frank moves immediately, not reacting to the impact, but to what it represents. Information being gathered, pressure being applied without commitment. He does not return the fire. He relocates. The space begins to change as soon as the movement starts. What was static becomes active. Angles open and then disappear. Cover becomes temporary. Frank shifts his rhythm, breaking predictable patterns, forcing the engagement into something less controlled, something that requires adaptation instead of reliance on preparation alone. Above and around him, the grim night adjusts without urgency. Every movement is measured, every position part of a structure that existed before the fight began. He does not chase. He redirects, guiding the engagement by removing the options, tightening the space without needing to close it physically. This one lands with intent, not lethal, but disruptive. Enough to alter momentum, to force Frank into a narrow set of choices. The environment responds to the pressure, turning open ground into exposure, turning cover into temporary delay rather than protection. Frank absorbs it and keeps moving. This is where his experience asserts itself. He does not require control over the entire field to remain effective. He creates opportunity through persistence, closing distance in fragments, and forcing the fight away from long-range structure and into something more immediate. The Grim Knight allows it, not as a mistake, but as a transition. The engagement compresses. Distance collapses to proximity. The fight shifts from controlled position to direct interaction, where timing replaces planning and reaction replaces prediction. Both men move without hesitation, their actions precise, efficient, and stripped of anything unnecessary. Frank presses forward with force, each movement designed to overwhelm, to create pressure that cannot be easily redirected. His strikes carry intent, his positioning aimed at forcing the Grim Knight into a reactive state. For a moment, it works. The Grim Knight is forced to close engagement, where the margins for control narrows and the pace accelerates beyond the structured planning. But even within that pressure, his movements remain deliberate. He does not resist the shift. He adapts within it. The counter does not come from the strength. It comes from timing. A hidden advantage revealed at the precise moment it creates most disruption. Not to end the fight instantly, but to break its momentum. Frank is forced back, not defeated, but interrupted. And that interruption is enough. The Grim Knight reestablishes distance, not fully, but enough to regain structure, enough to return the fight to a state where preparation matters again. Frank moves to recover, to push forward once more, but the timing is no longer his. The engagement ends the same way it begins, with precision. Frank Castle endures. He adapts. He pushes through the pressure in a way that makes him incredibly difficult to stop once he gains momentum. In a prolonged engagement, where control breaks down and the fight becomes something unpredictable, his abilities to persist would create opportunities others could not survive long enough to reach. But the Grim Knight does not allow the fight to reach that point. He controls its structure from the beginning, shaping the engagement in ways that limits the effectiveness of endurance. His approach removes time as a factor, replacing it with precision and preparation that dictates how the fight unfolds before it fully develops. Both are capable. Both are dangerous. But in confrontation, we're defined by control versus persistence. The one who dictates the terms of engagement holds the advantage. In the Crucible, the outcome is not always the point. Sometimes what matters more is what the fight reveals. The difference in approach, the way pressure is handled, the moment where control either holds or breaks. Because what we saw here was not just a clash of skill or firepower. It was the clash of belief. Frank Castle moves forward until something gives. He forces the fight into spaces where survival is earned through persistence, where the ability to endure becomes the deciding factor. The Grim Knight moves differently. He shapes the fight even before it reaches that point, removing the variables, tightening control, and ensuring that outcome is decided before the moment can become unpredictable. Both are effective. Both are dangerous. So now it shifts to you. When a fight like this has no clear outcome, when both paths can lead to victory under the right conditions, the answer is no longer something we define here. It is something you decide. Do you trust the one who adapts and pushes forward, no matter how much pressure is applied, or the one who ensures that pressure never has a chance to build in the first place? And more importantly, when the line is already gone and the only thing left is execution, which approach actually holds? Because in the end, the Crucible does not decide. You do.